Hey everyone, it's Jenny from JC Cards. Today I've got a video showing you how to use the WOW embossing pen. I am so excited. I know to get excited about a pen is a bit crazy. WOW's actually had this pen on offer for a while, and you may be familiar with other brands, but let me just tell you, this pen is a game changer. And I didn't even realise WOW had them until I spoke to Jo, who's the design team coordinator, and I said, hey, we should think about doing a pen. And she said, oh, there is one. So I grabbed it. So it's been in my house now for a couple of months and I'm finally using it. So it's very new to me. And let me tell you, this is the best couple of dollars or a couple of pounds that you could invest in a tool for your craft room. I'm going to be showing you today just sort of 3 techniques that you can do with this pen, but there's, I'm sure, lots more. I just thought of 2 more after I made this video. And we're over on the WOW Embossing Facebook fans page this month, also featuring new to me products. So I wanted to kind of get this one in, and I strongly recommend if you do not have this pen, you need to grab it. Also new to me is the new Gemstone Trio embossing glitter set. I'm going to be using all 3 of the colours in this trio throughout my video today. I'm also using some Distress watercolour cardstock, my Altenew watercolour, but you could use any watercolours, and this LAHAINA Emboss Cut and Emboss folder from Spellbinders. I've listed the WOW products in the description box below. So to start off with, I've taped the Distress watercolour cardstock to my craft mat and I'm spritzing it with water and then adding a wash. I'm using 3 colours from my watercolour pan set. I dried it on setting 1 with my heat tool. And then once it was dry, I went back in with the same colours, just making sure they blended nicely together and then dried it again. I'm going to be running this through my die cutting machine using this LAHAINA cut and emboss folder from Spellbinders. It dry embosses this gorgeous leafy pattern. It's very subtle, but it also cuts some of the images, and you can see here up close what that looks like. And I just wanted to have a nice kind of wash of colour in the background. What I'm going to be doing is using the pen to pick out some of the raised images from the dry embossing. This folder image is perfect for that. It's got raised images that you can pull out. It's also got some cut areas which you can outline with this pen. The pen is very fine tipped, which is great. It also works perfectly on dry embossing. You don't have to be too careful. You just rub that pen over like you would any normal marker pen. And yeah, it's harder to see because the ink is clear. It's clear embossing ink. It's sticky ink, embossing powder and glitter sticks to it. But if you struggle a little bit to see where you're putting the pen, you can emboss as you go along. So I'm using, first of all, this tanzanite colour from the Gemstone Trio. It's beautiful. So sparkly in real life. All 3 of them are. I think this is probably my favourite. I think I used it on all 3 cards today. And you'll see that I actually didn't use a powder tool or anything like that on this. You can if you want to, but you'll see it perfectly adheres to that outline that I've used with the embossing pen. And so I think someone asked me how long it stays wet for. I didn't test it, but I was able to mark up quite a few areas and add the embossing powder without any sticking problems. I could have probably done it all in one go, I think, and had it not had it dry in between. So I've gone back in, I've added a few of the raised dots, I've added embossing glitter to them. And then I've also, there's a raised border on this embossing folder, which makes it really easy to outline. So I went round the whole panel with my embossing pen and then added the tanzanite embossing glitter. And I then off camera trimmed it out right up to the edge of that border and then popped it up on foam tape onto a white note card. I've dived into my stash of pre-heat embossed sentiment strips. These are the Simple Strips Friendship from Tailored Expressions, heat embossed in metallic silver embossing powder on black cardstock, and I've popped them up on foam strips from Doris into the centre of my panel at jaunty angles. And then to finish it off, I've added some Tinseltown Sequins from Catherine Pooler just to coordinate. Some of these come in matte, some of them are sparkly, and I just thought they went really well with that embossing powder. And that finishes my first card. For my second technique, this is my favorite technique. This is my favorite technique of all of these. I'm so excited about this. I'm going to color in with embossing powder. Yes, I am. I'm using this floral stamp. This is from My Favorite Things. It's called Floral Focus. It's a really nice large stamp. It covers most of an A2 size panel of white cardstock that I've placed in my MISTI. I've popped it off just off the corner there, so I'm using one of my MISTI creative corners to make sure I get my panel in the right place. And then I'm going to stamp it with some coloured ink. So I'm going to be using pink embossing powders, so I'm using pink ink. This is fuchsia, crisp dye ink from Altenew. And I do stamp it a couple of times just to make sure I get a crisp impression. I also like to use dye ink rather than, VersaFine for this technique, because the image stamps a little bit wider, the lines, and it's helpful because it means, you'll see in a minute, when you come in with your embossing pen, you're not going to so easily cover up those lines. I'm also, before I start with my embossing pen, going to stamp the sentiment that says "Sending Love." I'm stamping it in VersaFine Onyx Black ink. Now, once my ink has dried, I'm just going to colour it in. I'm going to use my marker, and I'm going to colour in petals. And you will see I'm going to change colours. So I'm going to colour in. I wasn't sure how many areas I wanted to colour in at first, so I did one at a time just to build up my areas with embossing glitter so I could see kind of what I wanted to do next. But essentially the technique is fill in the area, add my embossing glitter, go back into another area, colour it in, add the embossing glitter. And you'll see I then, after 3 areas, I decided to heat up, and then I'm going to repeat it. And as I went through this, I kind of left more and more and more areas like not heated up, just added the glitter and moved on. And the reason I'm adding the glitter is so I can see what I've coloured, so it's easier for me to tell. And I was going for kind of like a stained glass look. Some of these petals I'm going to leave white. And so that's how it looks after I've done my first colour. And then I decided to come in with a different colour of pink embossing glitter. This is Cupcake Heaven. It's got a kind of hot pink base and then pink glitter. And it's one of more recent releases. I think it was towards the end of last year. It came out in the Sweet Treats set. It's now available along with the others in the set on its own. And I've done the exact same thing. I've come in, I'm colouring in an area, adding my powder. And I'm basically, as I colour in the area, I'm trying to stay inside that pink ink outline, because I wasn't sure at this point if I was going to fill in every area, and you absolutely could. I kind of wanted to leave the ink showing, and in the end, I decided to leave some white areas, just so people could see the pattern, but also I thought it added a kind of almost artsy modern look. And I just heat embossed as I went along. I'm using setting 1 on my heat tool for most of this, just so I don't burn the existing embossing glitter that I have there. And I decided that actually I was having so much fun here that I wanted to come back in and colour in some of the other areas on the image as well. So this is the Aquamarine from the Gemstone Trio set, and I'm using that on the solid leaves. A couple of them, again, I did leave white. But you'll see here I'm colouring in all of them with my embossing marker or embossing pen, and then coming in and adding the glitter and then heating it up. So it does stay wet for quite a long time. And then for the leaves that have got a lot of detail on them, I didn't want to cover them up, those veins along the centre. So I didn't want an opaque powder. So I've got frosting here, which is also from the Sweet Treats set. It's now available on its own. This is more translucent, this powder. It's actually quite smooth when you touch it, not crunchy kind of feeling like embossing glitter. And you can see on that big one I'm doing there, the leaf veins show through, so you don't lose your detail of your image. And then as a finishing touch, this is Sugared Almond. It's a gorgeous kind of pastely purple colour. Again, from the Sweet Treats set, now available individually. I'm just adding some of the embossing pen to those tiny little flowers, and then heat embossing, and that finishes it. And look at that's so cool. You can colour in with your embossing glitters. I love this technique. To finish, I added a few black splatters and left it at that. Now for my final technique, we're going to be colouring in some die cuts. I've got these mix and match MARIPOSA dies. These are from Altenew, and I didn't know how many I was going to use, so I die cut a few of them from some white cardstock, and some of them are solid and some of them have more detail in them. I thought this would be a good mix to show what you can do with the different die cuts and the dies you have in your stash. Some of them are going to be detailed, some of them are going to be solid. So for this first one, this is a solid image. I'm going to outline the tips. I've come in with my marker, I've gone around the top of the wingtip on the right, and I'm going to do the same on the left. And then what I'm doing is using my marker and flicking inwards from the top of the wingtip, almost as if I was adding detail with a Copic marker. It's a little tougher because you can't see the ink, so you kind of have to be a bit of, trustful. But that's why I'm doing this in 2 goes as well, so I can kind of see how it's going as I go along. The beauty of embossing powder obviously is if you don't like what it turns out like, you can just brush it off. And you have a little bit of flexibility within reason with the marker to correct some of it or go over it again. And I'm heat embossing this in Peridot, which is from the Gemstone Trio. This is gorgeous. Also, saying this out loud, I realised that I've never used that word out loud before. I've read it many times, so I apologise if I'm mispronouncing it. And then I'm using this embossing glitter on all 3 of the butterflies I end up using on the card. For this detailed one, I just coloured in all of the upper part of the wing, and then I'm now going to come in with a different colour. So this is the Tanzanite again. So I heat embossed all the peridot areas, and then I've come back in with my marker, coloured up the bottom portion of the wings and added the Tanzanite. And you'll see on this one, I also came in and went back over a little bit of the area that I'd already heat embossed in Peridot with the marker, added some detail by adding a couple of dots on the upper part of the wing and overlaid the Tanzanite over the top of the Peridot just to add a bit more interest. And this really opens up some exciting possibilities for embellishing your die cuts. You could outline some of the detail on the more fine, intricate die cuts. You can overlay different colours just using your marker as I did there, but just really go to town on it. To finish my card, I've got a panel of grey cardstock here, and I was hunting for my light grey ink, and I couldn't find it. And then I was like, well, I could just use my embossing ink, because it's a watermark ink. And so this is what I'm doing. I'm using these BAROQUE motif stamps from Altenew, and I've overlaid them using my Misty. I'm using that creative corner again because I've got them hanging off the edge. And I'm just stamping them with the WOW embossing ink. I did double stamp to get a clear impression, but that's it. I haven't used any embossing powder, I haven't used a grey ink, and you'll see you get that watermark kind of tone on tone look. And this works for any colour of cardstock. So if you're trying to find an ink that perfectly matches your cardstock for your card bases, but you don't have one or you can't find it like me, you can use your WOW embossing ink just as a watermark ink. Now what I've done is I want to make sure I get my sentiment in exactly the right place. So I haven't adhered those butterflies, I've just laid them out how I'm going to have them on the card. And then I was able to stamp my sentiment. I've stamped it in VersaFine Onyx Black ink. And this is from the recently released Altenew Painter Flower Poppy stamp set that has lots of great sentiments in it. The happy birthday was stamped directly onto the panel, and then I heat embossed the thinking of you in WOW opaque bright white superfine embossing powder onto black cardstock and trimmed it out. And then I've popped up my butterflies. I'm using liquid glue just down the center of the bodies on the back, and then folded up the wings to get a little bit of dimension, and finished with some gems. And that's a close-up look at my card. I hope I've inspired you. Be sure to go grab that embossing pen. It's amazing. You won't regret it. And I would also recommend checking out the videos over on the WOW Embossing YouTube. There's loads to inspire you on there. Tons of great designers. And this video was originally created for that channel. Have an awesome day, and I will see you soon. Bye.